Brought to you by...
In the wake of Halloween Kills, fans were left on the edge of the blade. Michael Myers was still at large. Laurie Strode was hospital-bound, nearly helpless to stop him. Her daughter slain by the monster, along with Tommy Doyle and many others. I think we all expected something highly intense for the finale of this new trilogy of films. However, director David Gordon Green had other plans in mind. Instead, he took the chance to change the game and deliver us something truly different for the franchise. Hello, friends, and welcome back to ETF. Today, I am excited to dive into David Gordon Green's finale to his Halloween trilogy. This film has proven to be quite a divisive entry into the genre, quite literally facing almost nothing but harsh critique from critics and reviewers, and outrage from the fan base that surrounded the series. So much so that I even read that a petition has begun to circulate online asking for the entirety of the film to be reshot to better please the overall fan base. And my question is, why? Now, I obviously don't expect an answer, and the ones I will receive are likely going to be violent, narrow views that lash out in the comment section without fear of repercussions. And you know what? That's fine. I love to spark a good conversation. Formulating my thoughts on this one has not been easy, and as a result, I have to apologize if this discussion feels a little bit all over the place. But I have a lot of thoughts to share, and will try to cover them as coherently as I can. I think everyone else went into this one with many different expectations of how the film would likely play out, and none were what I ultimately experienced throughout this finale. Instead of the usual cut-and-dry Halloween experience, I received something new and far different than anything that has come before, while also somehow harkening back to the narrative that has preceded it. In fact, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, because I don't quite understand the logic behind the hate that is being thrown at this film. Just because something isn't exactly what you wanted it to be, you're gonna rip it apart without any consideration to what good choices it makes along the way? What good is that going to do for you? You are still going to remain frustrated about it either way. Unlike every other reviewer out there, I don't try to rush out my thoughts or feelings on any particular films, because I prefer to take my time, collect my thoughts, even watch the film a few times before I verbal diarrhea my opinions all over the fucking internet. I'm not trying to be the first to do anything. I just want to make good videos that reflect my honest feelings. There are 1,000 of us out there doing the exact same thing, and ultimately, what does it matter when I decide to put my thoughts out there? It's one of the reasons I waited so long to cover Halloween Kills. In fact, I think the biggest sin that this movie commits is the use of Don't Fear the Reaper over the ending credits. This is a trend that needs to fucking die. The hate that this film is getting is highly reflective of the initial fan reaction to Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. When that film was released, everyone absolutely fucking despised it, because they tried to take the franchise in a new direction. One that I personally think would have been far better if it had been allowed to blossom. And now, all of those same assholes who spent years hating Halloween 3 praise it for how good it is on its own, when that was the fucking point to begin with. Now, I personally am feeling like the same thing is gonna happen with this latest installment. In Halloween Ends, it has been 4 years since Laurie's last encounter with masked killer Michael Myers. Lori is living with her granddaughter and trying to finish her memoir. Myers hasn't been seen since that Halloween night, and Lori finally decides to liberate herself from rage and fear and just embrace life. However, when a young man stands accused of murdering a boy that he was babysitting, it ignites a cascade of violence and terror that forces Lori to confront the evil she can't control. Green made the decision with this final entry to disappoint the overwhelming majority and shift the focus of the narrative off of both Michael Myers and Laurie Strode towards someone entirely new. The film opens on Halloween night in 2019, 1 year after the disappearance of Michael Myers. Here we meet Corey Cunningham, a young man charged with babysitting a young, well-to-do boy on Halloween night while his parents enjoy a night out. Unfortunately for Corey, a series of events causes the accidental death of the child, and Corey's life is suddenly thrust into a nightmare that quickly spirals out of control. The fear instilled by Michael Myers still being out there, even a year later, is what caused the accident that killed Jeremy, that sent Corey down this darker path that we are about to witness. We then jump ahead to present day, and over the course of the film, it is revealed to us how much Corey's life has been affected by this tragedy, and how closely linked it is to the stain that Michael Myers' rampage has left upon the town of Haddonfield. We are very quickly shown how the pain and violence that Michael caused has left this stigma onto the town. For 4 long years, people have tried to move on. Laurie has fought to let go. Allison is putting the pieces back together. Laurie has also decided to face her trauma and begun working on a book. But the town still yearns for someone to blame for their pain, hanging on the unavoidable, unanswered question of Michael still being out there. This story mostly keeps its focus on Corey, as we watch before our eyes as he evolves into a new kind of evil, which actually is sort of recycling the idea left at the end of Halloween 4. In that film, we saw Jamie don the clown mask and murder her mother in the bathroom, suggesting that the evil had now transferred to her as a result of Michael's psychological scarring. However, in the next film, they basically threw this concept out the fucking window in fear that they would receive similar backlash to Halloween 3. Note to anyone who has a unique idea for an established franchise, stand your fucking ground with your ideas. Sure, you might upset people, but at least it will be something new. I personally thought that taking this approach to this new film fulfilled a sort of need that I didn't even know that I had, to see that old idea given new life. There are motifs displayed throughout this story, most notably of transformation. At the beginning, the little kid Jeremy is dressed in a little werewolf costume, which he then sheds to reveal his more monstrous self, which we see as he pranks his parents, his babysitter, and just all around throwing attitude toward Corey as much as possible. We open on clips from the original 1978 film, before being shown glimpses of what the town has been reduced to as a result of Michael's return. The classic pumpkin opening titles takes on a new form as we watch each jack-o'-lantern tear open to reveal a new, transformed carving. The characters bring up the Death Tarot card at one point, which symbolizes a major change coming, the current phase ending and a new phase beginning. Throughout this film, we watch Corey transform into this hollow and empty monster, though with more rage than Michael himself ever showcases. We even see change in the citizens of Haddonfield. Jeremy's parents went from these high-class citizens to broken, damaged people after the death of their son. His mother is now a drunk. His father went from playing classy music on the piano in his home to playing pool in a dive bar. There's a small motif of Corey liking chocolate milk as well, which he doesn't gets a drink in the opening scene or at the gas station before he's accosted by the town bullies. This could be a symbol of him trying to hold on to his childhood innocence, an innocence that he unfortunately abandons as he's corrupted by the town and his anger. The themes of residual lasting effects continue on from the previous two films. The damage that the terror has caused continues to bleed from open wounds. Evil leaves a residue, and all that jazz. There was also a small detail that is so easily missed, that is also a strong clue to the themes that this film is showcasing. In a wide shot of trick-or-treaters, we see a fake gravestone in a yard that reads Noah Shape. Now, obviously, this is nothing but a filler shot that has no real purpose than to transition between scenes. However, even here, Green chooses to incorporate some meaning. The name Noah Shape. No shape. As in, evil has no definitive shape. It adapts and changes, becoming what it needs to live on. But this is just one example of how the filmmaking throughout this one, as with the previous two, is sound. Green utilizes each visual in the film strategically to guide us toward the conclusion of the narrative. He keeps Corey in these dark blues, a subtle reminder of the monster he's becoming, as it is similar to the jumpsuit that Michael wears. When Corey attacks the cop outside the sewer, he sheds his jacket, embracing the killer in blue that he is to become. He also uses a lot of foreshadowing to show us in visual ways what is happening to Corey. At the start of the film, he is at the top of the stairs, while in the end, he's at the bottom, symbolizing his downfall over the course of the story. This opening scene entirely mimics Michael's origin of killing his sister in many ways. Not directly, but in the sense of it being an isolated killing. Corey works as a mechanic, so we see him in the similar mechanic jumpsuit that Michael Myers wears. Early on, Corey injures his hand. Michael also has an injured hand. At the Halloween party that he attends with Allison, he wears a plastic scarecrow mask, very similar to the plastic clown mask that Michael wore as a child when he killed Judith. We even see Corey sit up at one point in the same way that Michael does. However, there are differences here between Michael and Corey that are glaring. Michael became a monster without motivation, while Corey became one due to the torment he was put under as a result of an accident, and a town needing to focus their anger and pain into someone in the wake of Michael's disappearance. Unlike Michael, the people Corey is killing throughout the film are immoral. He has reasons to kill them, because both he and Allison have been personally wronged by each and every one of them in some way. He's guided by a direction, rather than simply being an aimless and emotionless killer. A prime example is when Corey kills the radio DJ in a gruesome fashion, breaking open his face and severing his tongue, possibly because he said to him earlier that everyone knows his voice, like a song that gets stuck in your head. Now, he is silencing that voice. There are things that do feel a little out of place throughout, such as pointed out on Red Letter Media. There are moments of this film that even feel somewhat inspired by Drive, as Allison and Corey drive around on his motorcycle listening to synthwave. This comparison is very sound, given that the plot of Drive also watches a man who is trying very hard to be a good person, forced into becoming a monster, even in a misguided way to protect someone they love. But the big stuff that feels somewhat odd to me dips its toes into the supernatural a bit. In Halloween Kills, we started to talk about the unknown element. That Michael would just stare out his sister's window as a child for some unknown reason, and he was returning to that window again and again throughout that film, as if being drawn there, staring out at something. In this film, they basically abandon that notion and introduce a whole new series of unknowns that are left ultimately unexplored. I can accept the idea of Michael hiding within the sewers of Haddonfield for years. It's a concept that we've seen similarly before with him living underneath the Myers house in Halloween Resurrection. However, here, this concept is brought in a new direction. Michael has been dragging people into the sewers for some time, killing them without being noticed. When he grabs Corey in the sewers through the wall, there's this moment where they stare into each other, and we get this feeling that he is transferring his evil into Corey. It isn't until after this interaction that Corey begins exhibiting traits that Michael shares, lurking outside of Laurie's house, even suddenly seeming to appear behind her without warning. This feeds into a theme that actually started in Halloween 2018, though we didn't know it at the time, of Michael's evil passing on to those who get close enough to experience it. As we saw in that film, Green flipped the script, making Laurie exhibit elements that only Michael previously shared, vanishing after a perceived fatal attempt on her life, waiting for her granddaughter outside of her classroom window. It isn't until this final entry that this is further explored. We still see Laurie exhibiting some of those traits, mainly in the conversation that her and Corey have at the abandoned house, as she begins to recognize these same traits in him. Maybe she has carried the same evil with her all this time, but been strong enough to keep it at bay. In this film, the supernatural element of Michael seems a little closer to the surface. We see Michael as a beaten down and withered man, and Corey is able to overpower him at one point. Later on, when the cop follows Corey into the sewer, Michael butchers him, and in doing so, we see that he begins to almost become rejuvenated by the act of murder. Then, in the ending, as Michael stands over Corey dying, we even get a moment that feels like the evil is transferring back to Michael. This harkens back to that concept from Halloween 4 of evil being transferable to some degree, which I actually kind of like, but wish it had been more fully committed to. There's also this attempt during the scene with the cop that lends to another theory. When the cop is in the sewer looking for Corey, he finds a spot on the wall, a formation in the rock, that sort of looks like Michael's mask. Seeing this, I couldn't help but wonder why it was there. It's never brought up again, it's only there for a brief moment. Why would Green include this? As I thought more about it, I started to wonder, was Michael ever really there at all? Was there an idea that Corey just thought he saw him down there, and this experience is what ignited this inspiration to become him in some way? We know that there was another ending planned for the film, as David Gordon Green stated so in a recent interview. If this was the original idea, maybe the original ending saw Corey imagining that Michael was there, killing alongside him, and showing him how to become him. Then even imagining himself overcoming him, taking what is his, and becoming the monster that Haddonfield needed him to be. If this was the case, then the final confrontation here would have been between Laurie and Corey, and the evil would have taken a new shape that we would come to fear from now on. Piggybacking on this theory, I would like to add another caveat. We're given a scene just before Corey's big rampage at the end of the film. At the beginning of this scene, we find Corey sleeping in an abandoned house. The abandoned house of the family that he ruined at the start of the film. He is sleeping at the bottom of the stairs, in the very spot where Jeremy died. He awakens to Laurie sitting at the door waiting for him, and they share a rather strained conversation, where she is basically warning him off from Allison. My thoughts are that Laurie isn't really there at all. We know from previous events in the story that she doesn't trust him, and as a result, her mistrust is stuck in his mind. She is the only thing holding Allison to Haddonfield. He knows that he has to sever that connection for them to be free of her. His conversation with her is all in his head. His warped mind is painting Laurie as the villain of their story. And this idea would also stem into the final confrontation. How much of this is really happening? How much of what she is saying to him is all in his head? The dialogue he gives her harkens back to that imaginary conversation in the abandoned house, one that she would have not experienced. Could she have just shot him out of self-defense and then watched as he did this to himself to frame her, completely unaware of what he was even talking about. Looking at the movie through this lens adds a lot of context to so many moments that otherwise would feel odd when stacked up to the rest of the film. Think about it. I know Michael is an older man, but with everything we've seen him accomplish physically, how would Corey have been able to overpower him? Unless he never really did. I do want to talk a little bit about my personal feelings on this one. Overall, I very much enjoyed this final film. David Gordon Green delivered an experience that I definitely wasn't expecting. He turned the franchise in a new direction, and one I honestly was happy to see it go. However, that being said, I don't know if this was the right moment to take such a turn. With the way that this trilogy was building, I feel like keeping the trajectory and delivering a third film taking place on that same Halloween night would have been a much stronger way to go for this particular story. I love the Corey story, but I felt myself wishing that the character had been around longer. Maybe if he'd been introduced in the last film or in 2018, and allowed to slowly become the monster he does over the course of the trilogy. I feel that taking these directions might have eased the tension that surrounds this film a bit more. It's my feeling and my hope that the final scenes here will one day speak measures to the time in which these films were made. The entire town being gathered as Michael's body is dragged through the streets. They all come together to bear witness to the object of their fear as it is once and for all vanquished, giving closure to a town in agony. And Laurie finishing her book, giving herself closure, opening herself up to a relationship, to a future, to a life without the shadow of the shape looming over her. I can't help but feel that these ideas, like in the last film, lean toward a closure that we as a society all yearn for with recent events in our history. However, the need for those wounds to heal has proven to be lasting, and it is a long road to recovery. One final thing that I would like to touch on is that when the dust settles, the body of Michael has been disposed of. Allison is moving on with her life, and Laurie has wrapped up her memoirs. The film ends with a series of shots of Laurie's home, much the way Carpenter's original classic did with Haddonfield. Each room is empty of life, filled only with solemn silence. But the glaring thing that stays with me was the final shot, when we see Michael's mask resting on her coffee table. To me, this suggests that she's still holding on to her fear in some form, that an underlying element that has been sitting beneath all of these films still resides, that Michael's evil is still waiting for someone to personify it. It's my belief that David Gordon Green and the other writers approached this film with one goal in mind: to answer a question that I'm sure has been on the mind of every man and woman who has ever been a part of the creative process of a Halloween film. How do you bring an end to a monster that has been deemed unstoppable for so long? And I personally believe that he gave us that answer. Just maybe not in the way most people were hoping for, but in a way that I personally am very pleased with. The ultimate theme here is that we know that this will never truly end. As long as these films make money, they will always resurrect themselves. Because, as Laurie says, evil never dies. It only changes shape. But that's it. That wraps up my thoughts on Halloween Ends, which also wraps up the Halloween franchise as a whole here on the channel. We have finally reached the end of this story, at least until they reboot it again in a couple more years, because we all know that these cash cows don't die. Like evil itself, they only take on a new form and tell a slightly different rendition of the story for a new generation of audiences. After all, there are always more stories to tell. As always, this episode of ETF is sponsored by Movie Palette. If you're looking for incredible movie-related art to adorn your walls, look no further than the only piece of movie-related art that celebrates the color palette of your favorite films. And thanks to our partnership with Movie Palette, you can get yourself 15% off of your purchase by using promo code EMBRACE15 at checkout. So head on over to moviepalette.com and get your palette today. If you like this video and you want to see more content like this, consider supporting ETF over on Patreon. I'm working on finally bringing you guys some fun exclusive content over there, so show us some support and help me turn this into what I do full time, so I can bring you more content than ever before. Until next time, stay safe, thanks for watching, and have a happy Halloween.